broken. Oh, here it is, yes. Got the...
You have the mic.
Right.
We have the quorum. We have the quorum.
I think so.
We don't need it.
We don't need it? Yeah.
Exactly. Just in case he wants to know how many votes.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. This morning we begin with item 7, which is the control of online communication a threat to media pluralism, freedom of information and human dignity. Our rapporteur is Frederick Rice. The purpose of our committee this morning is to adopt a draft resolution and to approve the report on the control of online communication, a threat to media pluralism, freedom of information and human dignity, which he has prepared for us. Frederick, before asking the committee to vote on the report you submitted, I would like to ask you briefly to introduce it. If you've received some useful suggestions, which you may have done from members yesterday, and if you want, regarding any of these suggestions, to take them into account, you might also please tell us what these are and what changes they might affect, and that you have in mind to make as a result of them, and therefore to put in the report before we have an opportunity to vote on your report. Frederick, I give you the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Well, this morning I do have the honor to present a report and a draft resolution to you concerning a subject which is a regular cause for concern, that is to say, control of online communication. This report is about the profusion of information circulating throughout the world, where we need to be watchful and uphold our cherished values like the freedom of information and the freedom of expression. We need to make sure our medias are pluralistic and that human dignity is preserved, as we see in the title of this report and as the chair has just reminded us. I would also remind you that after the meeting of our committee in Paris, where we heard experts on this subject, I obviously took account of those experts' remarks, including them in the draft resolution, just as I took account of the comments made by the intergovernmental comments from the Council of Europe. Control of online communication has become familiar to us as we have worked on it, and it's a cross-cutting subject that we mentioned yesterday in the report, for instance, on youth and media from our colleague Tamar. Given the size of problems we presently see on the internet, I think we need to ask the right questions so as to allow our citizens to use platforms in a way that protects their privacy and their dignity. We all wish to see communications policies which are open, transparent, and we can only be concerned by the concentration of flows of online information coming from a small handful of internet intermediaries. Their impact on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law are a cause for grave concern. An intermediary on internet was often a bit of a grab bag, a general notion, but today the Council of Europe has very clearly defined what these service providers are, who facilitate interactions on internet between physical persons, that's to say individuals, and moral persons, which is to say firms. When we see today that internet companies have an unbalanced degree of power in the technological world and can therefore influence practically all aspects of private and social life of individuals. So when we call on them, these oligopolies say that they are guaranteeing the diversity of sources of information as well as pluralism of ideas and opinions online by calling on artificial intelligence. We see the emergence of a political power which is undemocratic, and when electoral communication moves toward the digital sphere, people who manage to control this, particularly during electoral campaigns, can become fearsome political powers. In France, what we've seen, what we call electoral advertising, quote unquote, which were often paper tracts. In French, we use the word propagande, which sounds like the word propaganda, which can be somewhat different in its meaning. But in France, when we use the word propagande, we mean communication during electoral periods in the highest sense of the term. But what we see on internet can be very virulent, can have false or manipulative information, and weigh upon the result of a ballot. When this report was drawn up, we were unaware that the Russian Federation was going to invade Ukraine last February 24th, but it's certain that in time of war, disinformation, non-information, bad information of populations can also be the source of negative forms of behavior which can endanger human lives in civil and military populations and indeed directly lead to deaths. And I also, this is a bit on the margin of this report, but I wanted to say that we all want to have a variety of information and a plurality of sources available online. Algorithmic systems are obviously very useful with the phenomenal quantity of information presently circulating, but we need to be careful about the way they may be misused or dishonestly used so as to create fake news or manipulate opinions or emotions. Let me also emphasize paragraph 7 of this text, and I will read it out to you. Assuming I can find it, that is. Let's see where I've put it. Here we go. Paragraph 7. With the emergence of internet intermediaries, harmful content is spreading at very high speed on the web. Internet intermediaries should be particularly mindful of their duty of care where they produce or manage the content available on their platforms, or where they play a curatorial or editorial role, while avoiding taking down third-party content except for clearly illegal content. And so, by way of conclusion, I'd just like to mention a trend we see toward regulating platforms, social media, sometimes endangering freedom of expression. Sometimes we can see perverse effects, and that's the point of paragraph 10, which says that if legislators choose to apply overly strict regulation to all internet intermediaries, including new smaller companies, this might consolidate the position of big actors which are already in the market. And to avoid highly dominant situation for new actors, obviously this will be welcome. And so, therefore, there is a need for a gradual approach to accommodate different types of regulations on different types of platforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Frederick. Are there any questions now to Frederick Rice? Or are there any immediate reactions which anybody might have? Yes, please. Tama.
Dear colleagues, let me applaud and say how valuable the report from Mr. Rice is, especially, of course, in consideration of my report, but totally as we agree that information society is the environment we're living in, the importance of the issues like, as my colleague has said, polarization, propaganda, disinformation, fake news, hate speech. These are the crucially important issues, and these are the questions on the table that should be answered. In context of Ukraine and in context of war, as we can see, we find that the spread of the grave atrocities that Russia is doing through its military aggression on the ground against children, against population, this is spread out very quickly. And so the awareness of the international society is there, and during war we need this type of awareness, and which makes it so clear what the Russia is doing. There are so many benefits of the media, of the quick media, of quick information. But what we need to concentrate ourselves on are, of course, the problems, the challenges. We are here for solving the challenges. So I think that this report, concentrated on the challenges, is very valuable input for our society, and especially for the subcommittee for media and information society. So I salute my colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And a question from the back of the room, please. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Chair, dear colleagues. For 25 years, I was a journalist. These days, we grieve the loss of colleagues who did not live to commemorate the World Press Freedom Day. Daphne Caruana Galizia from Malta, Yorgos Karaivas from Greece, all those who perished on the front lines of Ukraine, but also those who are in Turkish prisons because they simply had a different opinion from that of the Turkish government. In Europe, there is a significant question which remains unanswered, namely, who dominates over whom? Do media tycoons manipulate and control the executive power through the press? Or does the executive power try to impose policies by means of media owners? Berlusconi's victory in Italy has clearly shown that a bell is tolling, namely that financial interests have gained control over the media and, of course, have acquired a disproportionate amount of power. And this is a serious matter for democracy. Oligopolies and tycoons in the south and the north of the European Union. We see this phenomenon tends to become a new reality. A peculiar regime prevails in the field of the media, and is, as if this were not enough, journalists are persecuted or dismissed or even murdered, and non-systemic media are strangled financially, as the European oligarchs are in a possession of the entire production process of news, from the production to the press agency, since the current legal framework allows it. Interwoven interest and the triangles of power are some of the pernicious effects of an over-concentration of power. But on the other hand, a cloudy landscape is created whenever the key concept of the separation of power is lost. Monopolistic financial interest, wild power, media flirt with political power interfere with justice. Finally, tell me please, which country does what I am describing to you bring to your mind? Hungary, or maybe Poland, or could it be Greece or Italy? I think we are now talking about widespread new regime across Europe, and we need to look into it very, very seriously. What do we need, Mr. Rice? Social control, social accountability, transparency everywhere, everything open and accessible to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jane Stevens, could you please address us within 2 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't think I'll need 2 minutes. I just want to congratulate Mr. Rice on this report. I think it has some excellent suggestions, and we heard yesterday this is an extremely challenging area to make recommendations on. I want to especially support his suggestion that says human moderators have to play a really big role, a much bigger role than they do currently, because algorithms are completely not dealing with many illegal content. items, and they make quite strange decisions quite often. So I think that suggestion for far more human moderators should be absolutely recommended. I want to raise a question about the not acting on harmful content but focusing on illegal content, because just as a sideline, I think with young people and children, I think we discussed yesterday, I think there's a little bit more scope needed in that area. And as a question, the recommendations to break up monopolies, and I'm wondering in a global market what Mr. Rice thinks the main challenges will be to achieving the breakup of the very large monopolies that he recommends. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Osvali, could you please give us your comments within 2 minutes?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I strictly condemn Mr. Alexandrovs for his provocative, racist, and full of hatred speech. Mr. Alexandrovs do this every meeting. He does this every meeting. I don't know why. I think it will be better for him to go and to at least do a small research in his own country and see how the Greek government demolished the historical sites of Turkish minorities, historical sites of Muslim minorities. There is no journalist in Turkey because of his being a journalist. There are some people who covered them as a journalist, but in real, they are terrorists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I wonder if Frederick Rice could possibly now reply to these comments within 3 minutes.
Oui, Monsieur.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let me provide a few answers. I'd like to thank the different people who've taken the floor, even if there were a certain number of comments that didn't have much to do with this report. I think in the Council of Europe we have studied certain reports that talked about the role, for instance, of journalists and concentration of media power. I would like to take up a point in point 15.8 of the resolution where, in fact, we talked about a need for human presence. Artificial intelligence cannot do everything. And I definitely put into the report that the idea of moderation imposed by law foresees the need for human decision makers and integrates sufficient guarantees for the freedom of expression. And this is a dimension which is absolutely necessary. I think that as far as the rest is concerned, we tried to come up with a text that was well thought out to find a good balance without stigmatizing anyone. We know, I think everyone remembers, what happened in 2018 with Cambridge Analytica, where many reports brought out the dangers of the dynamic of digital information and its contagious and unhealthy possible effects. As far as I'm concerned, dialogue, generally speaking, and specifically intercultural dialogue, should allow us to counter sources of information which are often monodirectional and have rather open exchanges of views which are respectful between individuals and groups that have origins or ethnic or cultural or religious or linguistic origins that are different from one another on the basis of mutual understanding and respect. That was my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. If there are no objections, we can therefore, I think, note that we take or we approve the explanatory memorandum, and thank you. Next, we vote on the text of the draft resolution following the usual simplified procedure. I will call the different paragraphs and sub-paragraphs, and if there are no objections or proposals or amendments proposed to them, I will then consider that they've been adopted. If any paragraph should raise an issue, we can then discuss it before voting on it. So let us begin with paragraph 1. I see there are no objections. Paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I will now put the...
15.1.
yes, okay. I'm going to be thorough about it, I'm going to subdivide 15 in this way. You will notice that there are quite a lot of sub-paragraphs to it, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to refer to each one. Let me do it. Now. Where's it all gone? Can you see it? Can I take over your thing? All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Paragraph 15.1. 15.2. 15.3. 15.4. 15.5. 15.6. 15.7, and to be very thorough, when you get to 15.7, you will see that there is sub-paragraph 15.7.1, then 15.7.2, then we have 15.8, 15.9, 15.10, 15.11, 15.12, 15.13. I will now put to the vote the draft resolution as a whole. Who is in favour? Would you very kindly raise your identity cards or hands? Who is against? Do we have any abstentions?
One.
We have one abstention. So I'm happy to be able to say that the draft resolution has been adopted unanimously. And with that, the report is approved as a whole, and it can be scheduled for debate during our Assembly meeting at Strasbourg in June. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of all of us to thank a great deal of Frederick Rees for all the constructive and hard work that he's put into this very good report. We can now hold a hearing on Marta Grande's report, which is Building the Open Council of Europe Academic Networks. I would like to welcome our distinguished experts who have come along today. Firstly, Mr. Michel Nicoletti, who is former President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Professor at the Department of Letters and Philosophy, School of International Studies at the University of Taranto, Italy, and representative of the Ocean Project. We also have Marina Coloni, who is coordinator of the UNIRE network, which stands for Universities in Network Against Gender Violence in Italy. And finally, Mr. Giovanni Guiglia, who is General Coordinator of the Academic Network on the European Social Charter and Social Rights in Italy. It is a great pleasure for me to give the floor to our rapporteur, Marta Grande, for introductory remarks. Marta, you have the floor now.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I wish to tell you how grateful I am to all the experts who've accepted our invitation to come today. With them, we can share the experience we have acquired with university networks. With today's hearing, we wish to take a close look at interuniversity academic networking in conjunction with the conventions of the Council of Europe and other national and international institutions. We would like to have a better knowledge of mechanisms and potentials and the benefits of academic networking. The ultimate goal is to create a fertile ground, an educational ground, which can help us to foster the implementation of the founding principles of the Council of Europe and the legal, political, social, and cultural ecosystems of the European conventions. Democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are nurtured by the fruit of the work of experts studying research, science, cultural exchanges between scholars at national and international levels. We are aware of the many challenges that we must tackle, and in fact, there are more and more every month, apparently. But cooperation is important to work together through research, creativity, and innovation. In order to do this, of course, we need to be thinking and building peace. The fight against gender violence, protecting the rights of minorities, fighting corruption, protecting and developing social rights, the need to deal with climate change, and protecting our rule of law. These are all commitments that have been made by our governments. They are international in nature, and they require the backing of parliaments and the resources and the strengths and the talents of civil society and the academic and student world, and NGOs are all just as important. Universities will continue to be the engines of innovation and creative thinking because they produce skilled human capital, and this includes the future generations, European and national policymakers, and they foster political discourse and debate and guide change. They also have the potential of becoming human rights, democracy, and rule of law incubators. Global networks, European networks, universities, research centers, and individual academicians can cooperate with international organizations as well as European organizations which have begun flourishing in the past decade. Now, UNIRE and ANESC today are already working on this, on some of the key priorities for the organization. For example, gender violence and how to strengthen social rights in Europe. We know that we have resources which have not been fully tapped in terms of promoting our system of conventions. The ANESC and UNIRE networks can act as models for other thematic networks that also work with other Council of Europe conventions which are in line with ocean objectives. I wish to thank in particular Minister Maria Cristina Messa for her great interest and her contribution, which we'll be able to follow via the video that has been sent. And hopefully the Ministries of Research and University of all member states will decide to come on board. After seeing the video which illustrates the Ocean Project, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Professor Nicoletti, who was the first to conceive this project during his presidency of the Parliamentary Assembly, and to whom we are very grateful indeed. Professor Marina Coloni is the coordinator of the UNIRE network, and she will talk to us about an academic network, how it works and how it helps to implement conventions in this sphere. The professor also works as has also been given a mandate by Minister Messa on themes related to combating gender violence and all forms of discrimination. She's an advisor for the Parliamentary Committee of Inquiry on Femicide and also works on gender violence at the Senate of Italy. We will also hear from Professor Giovanni Guiglia, who is the Coordinator General of the ANESC network, the Academic Network on the European Social Charter and Social Rights, and we'll be able to illustrate this networking dynamic as well. Now, as rapporteur, it is important for me to understand how parliamentary democracy can help us to grow this project and how MPs can interact with their own governments and with the academia in order to enable a cross-contamination of ideas and a European renaissance which is based on democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Martha. We will now have a short video which will last 4 minutes. And this is on the Ocean Project. Immediately after the video, we will be able to hear 2 pre-recorded messages. Firstly, that of Maria Cristina Messa, who is Minister of University and Research in Italy, who unfortunately has been unable to join us today, and also unable to join us following the pre-recording of Christopher Porrell, who is Director of Human Rights Council of Europe. So could the technical team please give us, in chronological order, these aspects? Number 1, the 4-minute video. Number 2, the pre-recording of Maria Cristina Messa. Number 3, and finally, that of Christophe Poirot. Thank you very much.
The Open Council of Europe Academic Networks is a new and innovative project. It will bring universities, research institutions, governmental and non-governmental partners closer to the Council of Europe's conventions.
The launching of the Open Council of Europe Academic Network, OCEAN project, has the great potential to promote the Council's values and standards by reaching out to academia and research institutions in a more systematic manner.
It will foster an alliance with the young academics and researchers and build advocacy for the Council of Europe's conventions at both national and European levels.
A more united Europe without dividing walls starts from culture. Therefore, we must form an alliance with European universities based on the principles of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law.
What would the ideal cooperation between Ocean, the Council of Europe, and academia look like?
We hope to be able to offer many forms of cooperation through conferences, workshops, specific curricula on studies, creation of networks, perhaps even PhD studies on specific topics.
This cooperation will enable academics and researchers to conduct cutting-edge research.
Ocean will gradually integrate existing links and cooperation schemes between the Council of Europe and European academia and bring them together under a common umbrella. How will universities and research institutions support Ocean's work?
Une coopération approfondie entre les universités et le Conseil de l'Europe pourrait se traduire
Cooperation between the Council of Europe and universities would perhaps result in establishing summer schools and encouraging exchange of academics and students, and it might also result in joint training programs, for example, as well as common research programs.
Large number of different resources that partner universities and research institutes can make available for ocean activities, both in terms of logistic and support for research activities and in terms of funding specific activities.
Where do you see Ocean in 5 years' time?
All these national and international European networks will be able to work together and disseminate and implement the values of the Council of Europe.
Hopefully in 5 years' time we'll have a lot more areas in which there are these networks developing, collaboration taking place, a growing understanding across the piece in those member states.
So I imagine Ocean to be in 5 years an interesting hub for information, cooperation and exchange between European academia.
I believe that Ocean will be able to represent a truly international point of reference for the promotion of the Council of Europe conventions and common values.
Dans 5 ans, Océan pourrait prendre la forme.
In 5 years, Ocean could take the form of a Council of Europe Academy, which would house all training programs, all research programs, of course, in conjunction with all partner universities. Good morning. I wish to thank Marta Grande, who is the chair of the Italian delegation at the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, and my greetings to all the participants today. My warm greetings to Professor Calloni and to Professor Nicoletti as well. Unfortunately, I am not able to be with you. This is most regrettable because of the importance of this issue for my ministry, for research and the university. The international cooperation through an academic university network, in fact, is very important, especially nowadays when we have so many problems to tackle. The Ocean Project of the Council of Europe was conceived in order to be an additional tool which can support the conventions of the Council of Europe nationally and at European level as well. So academic networks, how they can cooperate to contribute ideas, to revise, to implement and develop the conventions of this organization. This is an important acknowledgement of research centers and universities, which can be centers of innovation. Now, in our country, we have experimented with the Unire network. This was the very first project in our country that dealt with combating gender violence in an integrated way in Italian universities. We tried to apply the principles of the Istanbul Convention in doing this. So universities, research institutes, educational establishments all have an important role to play in these processes, because they can show us the different shapes and colors and provide new prospects for our younger generations. We can help them to build up their paths so that they can follow their inclinations and ambitions, and we have to provide them with mainstays. Now, we would all like to contribute to the future of our youth. We want them to be curious, free. There shouldn't be any inequalities, no prejudice, no bias, and they need to be able to live in an international dimension. This is essential. Now, this is what everyone should do if they're involved in educating young men and women. Our task is to not simply look to one single university system, but we should focus on a network, a European network. And, for example, the Open Council of Europe Academic Networks is a wonderful project. And, in fact, European university degrees, these are important ideas and incubators. So we've got to remember how important European education is at university level, because the European dimension is the one which most represents our system. We want it to be cross-cutting, and we want to be able to provide a modular form of education. In other words, we need to keep in mind the actual needs that exist in today's world. And this is why we've designed some different programs. We want flexible programs, and we want to work with the concept of micro-credentials. What are they? They are short courses. They are units modular units of education, which can either be done together or one at a time or individually. And this is an important part of the curricula of our students. They are all certified courses. And this way we can certify that these graduates have indeed acquired some very important skills. So these are provided to our undergraduate students, but also to workers who must be reskilled somehow and therefore be able to seek out new jobs. This is a European project. It was established in European countries, and as I said, it is taking a cross-cutting approach. Now, we have ties at European level, and these are based on the fact that our university courses were transformed during the pandemic. It was swiftly decided, in fact, to use digital technology in order to be able to continue with remote teaching, with distance learning. Students could learn from home and continue their education. Perhaps that was not the best option, but it was nonetheless effective. According to the data provided by the Conference of University Rectors here in Italy, during the health emergency, in the first year, we started providing distance learning, and thousands of exams were held and 30,000 sessions during which students earned their degrees. So they didn't miss a step, you see, throughout the pandemic. And enrollment was also quite good. And in fact, we continued to have good enrollment figures. For example, in 2019 and 2020, just before the pandemic, we had 313,000 students enrolled, and in 2021, that number went up. It actually increased to 329,000 enrolled students. So you see, the university system was able to withstand these odds. This is what happened in Europe, but it also in Italy, but it also happened in other European countries. So it was possible to provide distance learning options, and among other things, it was possible this way to follow master's courses and undergraduate courses and to have this exchange, even if people were very far removed from one another. And this was very important because it supported the whole concept of European degrees and the possibility of having steady exchange programs. I must say that we were able to create an important instrument, although we realize full well that it is important to be physically present in a steadfast manner. People need to be on university campuses, in the classrooms. We need to have our students there. I know that they've suffered so very much because of this pandemic, and we are aware that there was a lot of stress, people who were disoriented, and there was distress, and this is what we saw all of us felt this, all of us experienced this, but our university students as well. We mustn't forget this. And in 2021, during the pandemic, our ministry allocated 50 million euros in order to finance psychological counseling programs and some tutoring programs, for example. In other words, we had to pay great attention to youth distress because we know that it's out there. And we made sure that there were places for students and researchers and professors and staff and administration and technical staff. We wanted them all to be supported, and they had to feel that someone was listening to them. We thought that this orientation was very important, and we wanted to build up in-house processes that would enable awareness raising among students, because students have to be able to intercept and report incidents of violence if they occur, whether it be verbal violence, psychological violence, it doesn't matter. And they also have to realize that we are allowing them to complete their studies and to fulfill their dreams. I must say that this has all been done quite seriously, and it is important to have a fair, equal, sustainable and peaceful future. This is a common European process, and we have to listen to this need and requirement. We have to bring together different cultures, different needs. We have to talk about values and rights. And I think that by doing this, we will rediscover a common culture and transnational cooperation. We have to be deeply engaged in promoting an anti-violence culture, especially now. And I think that the best weapon we have, the best defense that Europe can put in place will be to foster exchanges and to continue cooperating in many different spheres. Thank you.
Dear Minister, dear committee members, ladies and gentlemen, the Council of Europe's Directorate General of Human Rights and the Rule of Law has been supporting the Ocean Project and its development from the very beginning, when it was first proposed by Professor Nicoletti in 2018. And it gives me great pleasure to see that the preparation and the work invested now comes to bear fruit. Clearly, a project of this scope and ambition cannot advance without the support of our member states. Such support in times of political turmoil and scarce resources is not an easy thing to secure. And I take therefore special pleasure in thanking the Italian government for its unrelenting support for ocean during its Council of Europe presidency. Important steps have been taken during and with the help of the Italian presidency. Firstly, Italy has made a financial contribution which would be used for the practical launching of ocean. Furthermore, 2 PACE Committee on Culture hearings have been organized under Mrs. Marta Grande's guidance. I see this as a sign of the Parliamentary Assembly's keen interest in ocean, and we will await with great attention whether this will result in a PACE resolution. Of great importance, I think, for the future development of ocean is also the financial support which Italy has given over the year to Unire, Italy's academic network working on domestic violence. Unire, since its inception a few years ago, has evolved into what I think is a good example of how European universities and academics can successfully cooperate on the Istanbul Convention. For international conventions to be truly living instruments, it is essential that civil society, including the academic world, are actively involved in their promotion and implementation. Widening this cooperation by making Unire first an all-Italian and in a second stage a truly European network will not only help raise awareness of the convention, but also serve as a possible model for other similar networks working on other conventions. The pioneering role Unire has and the rich experience it has gained will no doubt be shared and lead to further growth of ocean. In conclusion, let me thank the Italian government again for their dedicated support and wish you a fruitful discussion. I would also like to thank Professor Nicoletti for his dedication, which has been and is much instrumental in the development of ocean.
Well, thank you, and we are very grateful for these interventions. I now would like to give the floor to Michel Nicoletti. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Parlerò in italiano.
I wish to speak in Italian. I'm very happy to be here today. As we've heard, the Parliamentary Assembly is where this initiative was born. And I'm indeed honored that the Assembly and the Committee on Culture have decided to look into the state of the art after the launch of this activity, and I thank President Dini Cox and the Secretary General and all the other colleagues and members of the Committee on Culture, in particular the President of the Italian delegation, Marta Grande. Now, it is important to take stock of what has been done, but it is also equally important to ask the Assembly to provide support and to be engaged in this initiative. The video and the different contributions have already clearly outlined the project, so there's no need for me to repeat this. The underlying idea, however, may be easily seen on this map. I must apologize for the fact that some of the countries are not represented here, but I'm sure that you can see that the university network, which is represented from a historical perspective, covers the entire continent, which was what we call the pan-European continent. My country, Italy, of course, was the country that hosted the very first universities. Universities do not belong to a country. They are just located in a country. The Germans say Universität zu Berlin. This is very important because a university is a form of universal heritage, and a country or community may host a university, its premises, but they do not own it. Now, it is not important to simply enact laws. The Council of Europe has established multiple conventions. We have the Istanbul Convention, we have Greco, bioethics, and we all realize that it is not sufficient to have good laws. We, of course, need to enforce those laws, but in addition, we need to have a new mentality, a new outlook, and therefore we need education and training. I think that the Committee on Culture should be a leader in supporting this cultural engagement, and it should underlie our conventions. But not only laws need culture. I would say that politics and policies also need culture. They need ideas. Now, what does it mean today to be European at a time in which Europe is being threatened? What is the cultural identity of that which we call Europe, or this thing that we call the pan-European continent, and that we see as an inclusive Europe to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west, as it always has been over the centuries. Ocean, the academic network, is bringing together academia from all over the continent to rethink what it actually means to be European. Monday, May 9th, they ended the conference on the future of Europe. And that was the conference that launched the European Union. And perhaps the Council of Europe might like to launch something similar. The Council might invite universities to the upcoming 4th summit, research centers, and together they can design the future of this great Europe, the future of the Council of Europe itself. And it is within universities that we have students and professors and researchers, and we have exceptional resources and energies, people who are all highly aware of the issue of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And we think that they would be the very best allies, partners in this extraordinary effort, which is that which is fostered by the Council of Europe. So when we talk about culture, we're not only talking about preservation, because, of course, we do a wonderful job when it comes to preserving culture. It is important to focus on our cultural heritage, even with new technologies, with digital technologies. We can digitize everything that we have, but Europe cannot simply be one huge museum. culture also means being inventive, being creative. And we know that there are many challenges that have come before us: climate change, war, migration, poverty. So to tackle these, we need to be creative. We must identify new solutions. So culture, seen as being creative, is what should be at the very center of our action and our concerns. An important feature of European culture is its humanistic tradition. And in fact, it isn't by chance that we see the linkage between human rights and our humanistic tradition. What does it mean today to take a humanistic approach to the huge issues of our time? So again, climate change is one of them, and we should no longer take an anthropocentric approach when dealing with how to deal with the human rights of the more fragile people: women, children, migrants, prison inmates, detainees. What does it mean to take a humanistic approach vis-à-vis artificial intelligence, or the challenges posed by bioethics, or even the challenges coming from technology evolution? And unfortunately, even when we come before a war which has broken out, it is important to engage in a dialogue with universities. This is key, and I must say that I am indeed grateful for the support provided by the Council of Europe here. And the Italian government has also been very supportive. I think that for the Parliamentary Assembly, this might be a very interesting challenge to tackle. In our European universities, we have the natural ambassadors of all of our work. Very often, the Council of Europe suffers because of the fact that it isn't as widely recognized as it should be. What would happen if in our universities, in our countries, we were to offer courses and workshops and information on all the activities of the Council of Europe, on our conventions, and so on and so forth? And finally, what can we ask of our members of Parliament here at the Parliamentary Assembly, and especially the Commission on Culture? So if you agree with this project, you need to know that we need support. We need cultural and political support for it to be pursued. And we also need governments of our different countries to be on board. They need to back our members of Parliament. MPs, of course, will be the essential interlocutors for all of this work. And in all of our universities, we need to disseminate this initiative. And we think that the members of Parliament of different countries can contact universities and research centres, the ones that they think might be interested in this project. And they can also contact experts, because we're not only talking about a network of institutions, but a network of people, of individuals, especially of youth, of young individuals. And we might also consider education programs and debates. Now, I've acquired a great deal of experience in the Parliamentary Assembly, and I must say that I've always enjoyed seminars and workshops organized by the Parliamentary Assembly together with university experts, where we've talked about corruption, for example, or where we've discussed the social charter. And I must say that I'm delighted to see today, in addition to my colleague Marina Calloni, Professor Guiglia as well, because the academic network of the social charter is the one that, of course, inspired us in our effort. I wish to thank you again for your attention, and I do hope that this intense work with the Parliamentary Assembly will indeed continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. Next, and since joining us again, I would like to welcome very much with us our Council of Europe Secretary General and Parliamentary President. There will now be a short coffee break. This is in order to give our interpreters a well-earned rest, as it also is to reward all of you this morning for good behaviour.
Coffee break.
Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, good. Yeah. yes, that'd be wonderful. Well, dear colleagues, welcome back. I hope you are well fortified and well inspired by the good coffee. And we are now going to get back to where we were. And we have heard from Michele Nicoletti, and we are very grateful for his contribution. And after him, I would like to call the next speaker, which is Marina Caloni. Marina, if you could please address us, and you have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now I switch to Italian. Gentile
Dear members of Parliament, representatives of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, on behalf of the colleagues from the academic network UNIRI that I'm representing here, I wanted very warmly to thank you for this invitation, which honors us. We were asked to explain a bit how our network works and how this could be applied in other contexts. The university system, as we've already heard, is undergoing transformation because of global changes. We're looking at fighting against violence based on gender, sex, or domestic-based violence, as we see in the Istanbul Convention, which had been largely ignored in the academic context. And so what we need to do is see these new tasks, in this case, preventing and fighting against these forms of violence. This is not just a social and economic and political fight, it's also a cultural fight. We need to change the way people think, dealing with innovations which deal with changing mindsets, inter alia. And therefore it's necessary to have a new alliance between different social actors, over and above individuals who can be interested, politicians, professionals, and to have a holistic and integrated approach. We think that also on the basis of the values expressed by the Council of Europe, that legitimate democracy is based on continuous interaction between institutions, experts, associations, citizens, so that the world of training and education plays a key role, because we have the task of training professionals and citizens in a society which is undergoing very thoroughgoing change. So the fight against violence and discrimination is a very key role that we are playing. On the basis of these convictions and also sharing the principles of the Council of Europe, we developed in the course of the last 3 years our network, UNIRE, which stands for University and Networks Against Gender-Based Violence in Italian, to have a better updating of the Istanbul Convention, particularly in terms of prevention. And we have also been inspired in the context, let us say, of the different parties of the Istanbul Convention, linked to the idea of consciousness raising of civil society. And I will use the limited time I have at my disposal very quickly to go over the 4 different phases over which we developed our network, and trying also to bring out not simply the replicable nature of this in other European contexts, but also what society, politics, and of course citizens and individuals have to win by this. So the original idea basically was born in the context of the prize for the best thesis for how to fight violence against women, which was set forth on the basis of the previous Italian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly, and thanks to their head, Michele Nicoletti. And the idea was then to put forth a scientific committee that would be made up mainly of teachers, experts, and professionals, but especially academics, who would later be the hardcore, if you will, of UNIRE. The second phase of the UNIRE project showed the potential of the initiative and the need to develop a more expandable project that applied to all universities. We decided, as often, to have a public appeal, a contest which we won thanks to support from the Equal Opportunity Department of the Council of Ministers. And so we have this project of 18 months, which began in December 2018 and ended in June 20. And this project was based on the work done by 10 universities with a working group. Milano Bicocco, which I'm representing here, was the group leader, and the idea was to have representatives of different Italian regions, north, center, and south, with representatives of different scientific disciplines. And the work done by UNIRI is basically founded on the idea, as we've said earlier, of developing and putting into practice articles of the Istanbul Convention, and particularly Article 11, which refers to data gathering and research, 12 on general obligations, 13 on consciousness raising and awareness, and 14 on education, as well as 15 on, which is of fundamental importance for us, and also in terms of training of professionals. And so this project was developed over these three basic areas: education, research, and the third mission, as we call it. These are the three pillars of the university. And here we have also added internationalization to this. So these were the different phases of development. First of all, we organized activities for each different unit concerned, dealing with skills and working out data for the different universities concerned, and then we started working with associations which were active in the field, and then fourthly, we worked together with national institutions and international institutions. So above all, given that we had plenty of training thanks to the Conference of Rectors of the Italian university system, we had that on 61 universities out of 99, and there was a great demand for activities concerning fighting gender-based violence, but what was lacking was a collector. And so what we decided to do basically was to develop that at the national level. And what was of fundamental importance here was the work done together with anti-violence centers, but also with the world of communications, so as to be able to communicate and to give and receive information of a more gender-sensitive nature. We worked together with different local institutions, like the regions, the Chamber of Deputies, the Senate, the committees in which we deal with femicide, the ministries for research, for justice, for equal opportunities, and as you've seen also in a conference that was organized or co-organized in the Senate, and also work done with departments for equal opportunity and the National Strategic Plan Against Violence. So the idea was to try to influence the choices that are made by institutions. And we also worked quite a lot with the European Parliament, but especially with you from the Council of Europe. And we were also invited to Grevio when it meant in Italy for the monitoring report, and our document and comments and recommendations were taken on board. Let's say that we were cited as an example of what good practices might be. And I think that this wasn't simply a form of wishful thinking, but rather something that can really be expressed in reality. In all of our activities, you can see in our UNIRI network that we've had different forms of communication. So the UNIRI project, let's have a couple of minutes on what's happened in more recent years. Obviously, we've been trying to benefit from the work we've already done. We've brought out this book, which I'll leave here for the committee, and we're now putting together an academic network. And we see a need to formalize this network, and thanks also to the support of the Council of Europe, we've also been able to collect more than 120 universities and professors who have expressed their willingness to contribute. And so to conclude, what do we think of the UNIRI experience, and can it be replicated elsewhere? I think, first of all, when we think about the replicative nature and the advantages of this, when you look at the Istanbul Convention that I quoted, I think we can see that it is possible to replicate this in the part on prevention in other universities, for instance. You can use a synergic or holistic method to think about all the different activities that are foreseen here. It's also of fundamental importance to have cooperation between academics and experts in the sector, and to have cooperation with territorial bodies, associations, professional bodies, and institutions. So what's the advantage for universities? First of all, strengthening university networks with sharing strategies. This can also be the goal of the Ocean program more generally. When we look at different sectors and when we want to develop further data gathering activities and have the development of a new category of researchers, the possibility of producing ad hoc results for doctoral students and others, the training of students are going to be future professionals, because we train psychologists, trainers, teachers, and others. And also, especially to have intra-professional activities. The advantages for governance is to see, first of all, that the Convention's objectives are met, to create a more equitable, nonviolent society, and then thinking about policies. We have the possibility to work as research universities on consciousness-raising activities and to have monitoring, as was the case, for instance, with Gravio, and also to have the possibility of policy development. Now, if we look at the end at international cooperation, as we were saying, this model that we worked out and that should apply to different social actors is replicable at international level, if not globally, as we have seen with our different forms of cooperation. There's still the issue of funding, because in the last year we were obliged to use our funds, as we've seen, individual teachers, professors, or researchers, but we considered that the institutional benefits, especially culturally speaking, in terms of cultural innovation, made this worthwhile, and we have tried to do this together with our colleagues so as to be able to find ad hoc financing for similar networks, to avoid leaving this up to individual initiatives, and to be able to have collective projects that would be sporadically concluded. Thank you very much for your attention. Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much, Marina. And I now give the floor to Giovanni Guiglia. You have 10 minutes.
Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. I will wish to thank you all for this invitation. I hope that this will be something that will be useful for you, to show you how our academic network works on the European Social Charter, and this is a European network on social rights, which was set up by the Secretariat of the Social Charter, and it was inaugurated in the course of a meeting which was held in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe on May 2nd, 2006. It was initially created without a strict legal form, and it worked for 2 or 3 years as an informal group that was made up of members that come from different European universities who deal with the European Social Charter and social rights. And already at that time, they undertook different activities and launched certain initiatives, some training courses for union members and for NGOs, and had research and comparative law and international law. There were studies on activities undertaken by states parties to the Charter and their effective application, on the social law of the European Union, on perspectives of labor rights in Europe, and the problems that concerned these at national level. In spite of the commitment that was made by its initial organizers, the informal network had to stop for a few years, and then, or slow down at least, and in 2012 certain members then got it started once again. And in Italy, the first national section was created, and it was decided at that point that the network would be formed with a legal structure and a status. And on 29 November 2013 in Paris, in the premises of the Council of Europe, the Constitutional Assembly of the network happened, during which its statutes were adopted, which explicitly foresee close cooperation with the European Committee for Social Rights, the Service of the European Social Charter, and the European Code on Social Security of the Council of Europe, and of course any other body of the Council of Europe which might be interested. The network in particular has become an association which is ruled by the measures of the Civil Code, which are upheld in the Departamento of Alto Reno and Basso Reno, of the Upper the Upper Rhine, Lower Rhine, and Moselle. The present legal headquarters is in Strasbourg, and at the Constituent Assembly, Professor Jean-François Adjikandi-Combé, member of the École de Droit of University of Paris 1 Sorbonne, was elected general coordinator, and at the end of his term in 2016, your humble servant succeeded him. Following its status, RACSE has the goal of promoting the European Social Charter and other instruments for protecting social rights in Europe, and also to make them more applicable. We also have training and research to promote events, research and publications. The statute also stipulates that jurisdictional proceedings or national conflicts, international ones, may be dealt with, and particularly on an amicus curiae basis. Its activities are funded by contributions from members, including some individuals and some firms. RACSE has 200 members that come from 15 countries. I will call to Austria, Belgium, Cyprus, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, UK, Slovenia, Switzerland, Turkey, and Hungary. Members are subdivided in 9 national sections: Belgium, France, Greece, Ireland, and UK, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Romania, and Turkey. And in May, this week, in fact, the Hungarian section will be created. Members coming from different academic contexts from these countries have different specialties, and particularly they don't only deal with human rights or social rights, but also, more generally speaking, international law and EU law, labor law, social law, constitutional law, and law of local authorities. The network does not only include young research and teachers, but also university students and doctoral students and researchers, as well as judges, lawyers, and public servants. RACSE presently is committed to working out comments on the Charter in English, edited by Brill, whose first volume is presently being printed this week. This work has required great commitment from all the sections, and it will be made up of 8 volumes. The French language translation of each volume and the publication of these, which are not being supported by the publisher, are presently being studied by the leadership of the network. It may not succeed if we do not manage to meet the high cost of translation and linguistic revision of each volume. There have been many activities since refounding in 2013. Here we have, for instance, some that are organized by the Council of Europe, in which there has been active cooperation, beginning with the high-level conference on the European Social Charter, which happened in Turin in 2014, and then after that during the Belgian presidency in 2015 in Brussels. And then I could also recall, for instance, our participation in Nicosia. RACSE also participates every year in meetings of the drafting group for social rights created by the Human Rights Council, a committee of the Council of Europe. National sections on their turn also have publications and organized study days on different subjects, including many seminars for training, particularly for judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and public servants. And here I can also recall that last year, on the 60th anniversary of the opening up for signature in Turin of the European Social Charter, the different sections of the network organized, for instance, a seminar in Brussels with the support of the Council of Europe, and an international agreement on recognition of the Charter in the context of different jurisdictions held in Turin, also with the support of the Council of Europe. I should also point out that during the school year 2021-22, on the initiative of the Belgian section, the network organized the first edition of a moot court concerning the Charter. This was a bilingual English-French contest that was limited to law students at the university. It was supposed to be a fictitious collective claim with a written and oral phase, simulating a hearing at the European Committee for Human Rights, which was held April 1st of this year in Brussels at University Saint-Louis. In the competition, 9 different European universities participated, and the winner was the team for the University of Ferrara in 2023. In that university, the second contest will be organized. Cooperating with universities, which is the largest number of RACSE members, is obviously an essential element for our association, which from one year to the next is not stopped growing. Some of its members are encouraging the stipulation of framework agreements and inter-university conventions to make students more mobile, as well as researchers and professors who intend to take part in the study and promotion of the convention system of the European Social Charter, so as to increase the protection of social rights in Europe. For instance, at the University of Verona, where I work, the University of Sorbonne Paris Nord, there has recently been a convention signed which in particular allows specific cooperation to take place at doctoral level, and finalizing the simultaneous granting of doctoral degrees from both of these institutions in the context of the shared discipline of law and political and social science. Moreover, such conventions promote the development of shared research projects, which could lead to joint publications. Based on a framework agreement which was already concluded, this can also allow us to have exchanges of administrative staff, teachers, of doctoral students, researchers, and students. Finally, convention also expressly calls for shared activities between both research institutions so as to make them operative and based on the study and promotion of the European Social Charter, taking advantage of the RACSE. We have also developed an interesting partnership between different universities represented in the network by different teachers and researchers, intending to promote the development of their relations and university exchanges through the Erasmus program. We also see RACSE members becoming coordinators of such programs within their own universities and have as correspondents in the other university members of the same network and who commit themselves to encouraging exchanges between students, researchers, and teachers, and who intend to specialize themselves in different matters concerning the social charter and social rights. So the idea here is to create and develop progressively synergetic relations, which at the end of the day will involve and link together, even indirectly, the Council of Europe and the European Union, or better, their competent institutions and their legal regulations. I'll conclude with one simple consideration, which I'm sure will seem obvious to all of you, but which still for us in the RACSE is an important goal to pursue and to meet. Given the leadership and representative organizations of our network to have effective application of the European Social Charter in the signatory states, we will need to have more awareness by national judges and an increased involvement of all jurisdictions, both internally and internationally, at all levels. In particular, in the states parties, where there is a school for judges, we should, we think, have intensification of the training on the conventional system of the European Social Charter, in our case, without having that form of new training for new judges, but will also have to be extended to those who have been serving for a longer period. Without this, the effectiveness of the Charter, at least in some countries, could really be simply an illusion for some time to come. As a result, greater involvement of academic networks to this end should lead to a greater and more appropriate formalization either at political and institutional level or at judicial level. This needs to happen together with universities, which in reality are often already called upon to work together in training of judges, but also can be acted upon more systematically with academic networks. So overall, without many different and well-articulated synergies, either between institutional actors or with and between all the other potential subjects who could be involved culturally and socially speaking, the effective respect and full benefit of the rights which are covered by the different instruments of the Council of Europe can break down with simply being formally recognized or with only given partial or evanescent protection. I thank you very much.
Giovanni, thank you very much indeed. From William Shakespeare, we know about two gentlemen of Verona. You were certainly one gentleman of Verona who meets these very high standards. We will now have a short discussion Bearing in mind the extremely useful contributions of all our experts, who would like to be the first to comment?
She has to leave, Mrs. Browers.
Yes, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will thank all the people who shared a lot of interesting information with us, and especially Professor Nicoletti. And I have a special question. I would like to know which universities exactly already joined the ocean project, because on the map we saw with the green and rose colors with the countries, I saw that my country was in light rose, while we have one of the oldest universities in Europe, and it is in my own town. So I was focused on it. So I wanted to know which universities already joined the project, because the Catholic University of Leuven exists since 1425. It's almost 600 years old. And if it is possible, I can contact, of course, as a local councillor, as a senator of my country, I can contact universities in my country to join if there is any interest. And maybe other colleagues can do the same, because I think this is only starting, if I understood it well. And it would be interesting to have really the oldest universities inside the project. So that's a little remark I wanted to make, and if I can be helpful, I will, yes, I'm ready to make the necessary contacts. Thank you.
I next call George Fuchs. George, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up along the lines of the question we've just heard. I found the presentations fascinating. However, I wonder sometimes if in the Council of Europe, and indeed in universities, we are too preoccupied with administrative detail, with bureaucracy, with structures, and with the minutiae of our organizations. And I say this as the Council of Europe representative, as well as asking it about universities. And now that sadly the United Kingdom are no longer members of the European Union, we're wanting to promote the Council of Europe as a great opportunity for European cooperation. But it's very difficult to get the message over, because very little is known about the Council of Europe. And I wondered what this network is doing to promote the Council of Europe and the work that you're doing as being something that has emerged from the Council. I would like also, as I say, to follow the previous question. I'm not clear which universities in the United Kingdom, in Scotland in particular, but the whole of the United Kingdom, participate, and how active they are and how involved they are. Because we should be, in our own countries, we should be following up this to indicate that this is something that the Council of Europe is doing, and using it as a good example of the Council of Europe's effectiveness. The other thing I'm not very clear is Giovanni mentioned on a couple of occasions the European Union. Are we in any way duplicating what the European Union seeks to do? Or are they duplicating what we have already done? Because that is something that happens from time to time. And it's always useful, I think, for us to make it clear that there are certain things that are the responsibility and the raison d'être of the Council of Europe, and not something that should be taken on by the European Union. So, as I say, I'm a bit baffled as to what the extent of the network is, what the awareness of it is, and what the understanding that it is an initiative of the Council of Europe and something that we should be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Next, we hear from Theo Rustopoulos. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, dear Alexander. I just want to make a comment. I want to thank all distinguished speakers, especially our ex-president of the Council of Europe, Mr. Nicoletti, who is actually the role model of what Plato said, that the politicians should be philosophers first and then politicians. I found this tremendously interesting, and I hope this initiative will be fruitful and successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Theo. And finally, I call on Mr. Aydin. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. And I would like to thank all the speakers for their enlightening information about this new project. But on the other hand, I think we have got a very similar one which has been started ages ago. It's a kind of European inter-universities project in different names, you know, under different titles, from Erasmus to Socrates, from Lingua to lifelong learning. And as being a part of that project, I've been to different universities as a representative of my university in Turkey. And I really wonder, what is the main difference between that kind of project and the one you have started, which is, you know, positively welcomed anyway? Thank you.
And our final commentator will be Roberto Rampi. You have 2 minutes.
I'll need even less than that, Chairman. I simply want to say that I was quite fortunate to be there when this idea was being toyed with. And this is, of course, a very important meeting that we've been holding in the past couple of days in Italy, because if we want the Council of Europe, despite the enormous difficulties, but if we want it to keep up this great work, then we've got to refound the structural dimension of the democracies in our countries. Now, it was said quite beautifully, and that is that it depends on the rate of cultural dissemination. Universities are not simply places where one studies, nor where youth go and take exams. This is often how we see our universities, but this is wrong. Universities are wonderful research centers, and in Italy we often talk about their function, the third mission. In other words, they have to disseminate this concept of quality. In the present day, we have many instruments available. We've been talking about social networks, for example, during our meeting, and they seem to be dimensions or spaces or spheres for dissemination. But what are their sources, in fact? Now, I don't agree clearly with censorship. I think that if we're going to counter misinformation, we will have to provide widespread quality information. We need to disseminate authoritative information. So we've got to build up that kind of network because that's how we can back our engagement. It can become a huge platform for the dissemination of information to the younger generations, and we can be a linkage. We can take complex information, which is what we do, and make that information comprehensible, turn it into quality information. I think that's a wonderful project, and I do like this idea.
Thank you. Now I invite our rapporteur, Marta Grande, to reply. Marta, you have 3 minutes.
Sì, in realtà As a matter of fact, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask a question to the speakers, and in particular, Mr. Nicoletti. My question has to do with who and how can we pursue this activity. Who can be involved and how can we pursue it? So we have to continue to take a close look at what we need for these networks. So what offices already exist? Can they be involved? Because perhaps they're already cooperating with the Council of Europe in some spheres, or maybe with other institutions, and maybe they can all be involved somehow, because this way we can have a clearer idea of how we can structure our program. Because I'm hearing the different questions here in our meeting and on the outside as well, and I see that people are trying to gain a better understanding of how we can concretely structure the project. Now, clearly, there must be a procedure to follow. We will have to deal with a general project, but we've also got to see how we can ensure integration and how we can have universities from all of our different countries on board. Thank you.
And thank you very much. So the final contributions, which I will invite, are from our experts. If they would be so kind, each of them, to reply to what they wish to address within 2 minutes. May we perhaps take our experts in the chronological order that they've already been taken. I invite first Michele Nicoletti to comment to us, if he'd be so kind, confining his marks to within 2 minutes.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to the participants for the questions they've asked and for their interest in this matter. I do apologize to the representative from the University of Leuven. This map that I showed you is not an official Council of Europe map, and clearly there is some information missing. And of course, the University of Leuven, the Catholic University there, is one of the most ancient universities in Europe and therefore an essential participant in the network. Now, what I've illustrated to you is a new project. For the moment, we don't really have any universities that have officially joined the project. Over the past few years, we did carry out a feasibility study, and we visited some of the universities, for example, Oxford and Cambridge. And we also had a meeting with the British government, the French government, the Turkish government, and others as well. We wrote to all ambassadors to see whether or not they would be interested and if they had any information that they wanted to provide us with. So this is the campaign that we have launched in order to see whether the universities in different countries would like to express their willingness, their desire to be part of the network. This is what we are seeking also concretely from members of parliament. And I think that that's a way for them to be engaged in the project. There was another question about whether or not we are duplicating what the EU does and what makes our project original. Well, in brief, we are focusing on the conventions of the Council of Europe. So compared to networks of the past or compared to EU projects, now, clearly, we wish to cooperate with all of them, but our idea is that we will focus on the Council of Europe conventions. They will be at the very center, at the core of our academic engagement. So the European Convention on Human Rights, the European Social Charter, the Istanbul Convention, the Oviedo Convention, Greco, and so on and so forth. That's our focus. So that's what makes us original. Thank you very much.
Marina Calloni, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President.
We've also spoken about the challenges that universities must face and our commitments, because alongside teaching, we've got to carry out research. We have our third mission, and we also have international relations to support. And of course, there is a lot of administration, a lot of red tape, forms of neoliberalism, which are an obstacle, but we're going to have to overcome those hindrances as well. And maybe we can do this by finding new ways of cooperating, not only competing with other universities, but we must also cooperate at national level. As Professor Nicoletti was saying, I think that the real challenge for the Ocean Project is to focus on the conventions. And of course, the Istanbul Convention has come under attack. You know that on the 11th of May of 2011 in Istanbul, they signed the convention, but Istanbul is no longer there. So we are taking a humanistic approach, and we need a new mindset, as we said. So what we have to do is to keep defending human rights. The 49 Council of Europe member states must do just that. That's our perspective, because gender violence, domestic violence will have impacts on our future generations. They have huge human, social, and economic costs. So this is how. This is why we should all feel very united within the Council of Europe group of states. Now, the Istanbul Convention, in fact, makes networks replicable. We have relations between institutions, professionals, the world of universities, education, academia, and so on. So this is a wonderful experience, and we'll see that there are multiple benefits at institutional and cultural level. So government institutions and the civil society, in addition to families and individuals. That's where all the benefits lie. So we have a humanistic approach, but also a technical, operational approach. In other words, we have certain methodologies to follow, and substantially, it's a new way of defending human rights. And we have to start from the bottom up, basically. That's how we should operate. And if you like, we can perhaps further discuss how we will implement some articles relating to prevention. And no, again, I don't see any competition with the EU.
Giovanni Guiglia, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me follow the order of the questions. Well, our network was established in conjunction with the work even done at the Catholic University of Leuven. In fact, Professor Escuter is still a member of the network. And that shows that we don't have any problem in having ties with this very noble and ancient university. Absolutely not. With regard to the UK universities, there was a question there as well, and there is another academic network that deals with the European Social Charter. Yet, in our network, we have an associate member, which is a current member of the European Committee on Social Rights, which is with the Nottingham University. So we do try to entertain relations with UK universities, but as I've mentioned, there are some alternative options as well. And on the EU law, I don't see any difficulties there, because with the European Social Charter, we constantly try to show through writings, even Professor Deschutes has been writing since 2004, we try to show that the European Social Charter is an international instrument of the Council of Europe, and when it comes to protecting certain social rights, it tends to maximize protection. What does that mean? Well, the European Social Charter, as compared with European law, has some areas, especially when it comes to labor law, that provide more protection. You see, so our idea is to maximize the degree of protection of social rights, and we do it through this instrument. So I don't see that we are duplicating what the EU does. I see it as an alternative mechanism, and I know that sometimes there are some difficulties with regard to adhering to the European Social Charter. In any case, this is the difference. Now, there are other differences between the Council of Europe network and other academic networks. The consultancy contracts. At my university at the moment, we have a consultancy contract with the Department of the European Social Charter. That way, the supervisory body of the Charter will, in fact, be overseen, especially when oversight needs to be carried out vis-à-vis the Italian government. In fact, the replies of the government may be supplemented not only by NGOs but by universities as well when there are control cycles carried out. So this academic network will be very important. So instead of stipulating this consultancy contract with only one university, we can stipulate them with an academic network, and that network will make available the very best of its members, and in doing so, they can make it possible to better implement and enforce the European Charter and all the conventions of the Council of Europe. Thank you.
Very much, and this concludes our very constructive consideration this morning of item 8, the Council of Europe's academic networks. Item 9, we now have a hearing on cultural heritage and climate change, which is going to be assisted by two experts. Alessandra Bonanza, representing the Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate, National Research Council, Bologna, Italy, and Mr. Dario Camufo, National Research Council, Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate, Padua, Italy. But first, I give the floor to our rapporteur, Mr. Alberto Ribolla, for his brief introductory remarks. Alberto Ribolla, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, a formality, I have to declare that I have no conflict of interest on this argument. Regarding my report, in September 2021, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe called for an ambitious new legal framework, both at national and European level, to anchor the right to a safe, clean, healthy and sustainable environment. In the resolution on research policies and environment protection, which was prepared by Mr. Olivier Becht, former chairman of this committee, the Assembly underlined that research can provide the innovative solutions that are necessary to counter both the impoverishment of the planet and the problem of climate change, and to ensure the sustainable development of our societies. Research and new technologies can also provide answers to mitigate the effects of climate change. The Council of Europe Framework Convention on the Value of Cultural Heritage for Society, FARO Convention, emphasizes that cultural heritage and culture in general are at the center of the new vision for sustainable development. The FARO Convention established close links between heritage, human rights and democracy. It considers heritage both as a resource for human development and for enhancement of cultural diversity and promotion of intercultural dialogue. Heritage becomes a key part of a local economic development model, which is based on sustainability. Dear colleagues, the cultural heritage of Europe is today under serious threat of the devastating effects of climate change. Floods, strong storms, heat waves, extreme rainfall, drought, and landslides affect monuments, archaeological sites, historical cities, historical houses, parks and gardens, museum collections, and libraries. The foreseen rise in sea levels will cause additional coastal erosion and invasion of salty marine waters, affecting coastal heritage, with an effect not only on the jewels of European common heritage, such as the Venice Lagoon and other historic coastal cities, but equally the livelihoods of people living in these areas. We should explore the conservation needs and research in new technologies to prevent or mitigate the effects of climate change on cultural heritage, recommending that this specific heritage-related activity be pursued in the future within the Council of Europe culture and heritage sector. I have now the pleasure to welcome the two experts from Italy and to thank them for their presence here today, Ms. Alessandra Bonazza and Mr. Dario Camuffo from the Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate, National Research Council from Bologna, who will focus their presentation on cultural heritage in the Italian National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change, and the second, Mr. Dario Camuffo from the National Research Council, Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate from Padova, who will present the special case of countering climate change effects on the Venice Lagoon. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for your introduction. I now give the floor to Alessandra Bonazza. Alessandra Bonazza, thank you for joining us. You have 10 minutes.
So I will remove, if you don't mind, the mask. So thank you very much for this invitation, to be here with you. And we are all aware that cultural heritage is at risk because of climate change. So we have slow cumulative damage processes due to the impact of changes in temperature, precipitation, pollution, but also we have extreme events that are linked to climate, induced by climate, which frequency and intensity has been evidenced to have increased in the past, and they are foreseen also to continue to increase. So thank you very much for the introduction by Mr. Ribolla, because you very much underline which are the different effects to which our cultural and natural heritage is exposed to. Fortunately, we had a lot of work by the research activities done during the last year evidencing how much it is at risk, and we have a very important turning point in 2018 with the Year of Cultural Heritage, where the European agenda were much focused on the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage towards the impacts and the effect of climate change. Focusing, therefore, that the actions should be specifically addressed on prevention, mainly focused on preparedness, by setting up mitigation and adaptation strategies. Where if you look at the policy at international level, and if we look at which are the strategies available that includes cultural heritage, I have to say that it is with the Sendai Framework for Action 2015-2030 that we have finally specific mentions to the protection of cultural heritage, including landscape, and in particular in the three different priorities of the Sendai, but I would like to focus specifically on priority 4, which it is enhancing disaster preparedness. So here it is highlighted how much is important to be prepared, how much is important to be aware of the impacts, to have the knowledge, and to transfer this knowledge to policy and decision makers, particularly to all actors that are involved in the decision-making process, specifically devoted to the different sectors that are at risk, including cultural heritage. But going to the national level, well, there are, if we look at which are the strategies of adaptation to climate change at national level, we have to say that unfortunately, it are the examples that we have of inclusion of specific strategies for the protection of cultural heritage are few, sporadic. We have a good example in France, where the National Plan of Adaptation to Climate Change include specific mentions and strategies for the cultural heritage protection. Ireland, which is the most recent one, it has been set up and adopted in 2019, but the most, I would say, old one, which process of preparation started in 2012, is the one in Italy. So we have the Italian National Strategy of Adaptation to Climate Change that includes specific mentions and specific strategies for the protection of cultural heritage. And several projects, research projects coordinated by Italy and also by the CNR and other colleagues from the universities have actively participated to transfer and to use these results in order that can be absolutely useful and utilized for setting up these strategies? Well, the National Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change in Italy has been aimed to assess which are the impacts of climate change on different sectors, and as you can see here, highlighted in blue, fortunately cultural and natural heritage is included. The roadmap and approach has been very important because it has been highly multidisciplinary approach, looking at which are the needs of the stakeholders, having a very important involvement with the different stakeholders that are actively committed to work for the protection toward cultural heritage impact. And of course, we have this consultation ad hoc with ministries, with policy and decision makers, but also with citizens, because they are very important social players in taking and moving, which are the, in addressing which are the final decisions that has to be taken at policy level. Well, we have here very important technical reports that have been issued within this work. And one of the most technical and scientific reports is about the evidence of the impacts, knowledge on the impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation of also cultural heritage, and highlighting which are the still lacks and still existing gaps, and highlighting how much it's important to have a specific monitoring of the climate and pollution parameters with priority in causing the damage, looking at the fact that we need to have prediction and scenarios at very local level in order to being able to protect our richness of cultural heritage in terms of both built environment but also landscape. And unfortunately, the still existing scenarios refer mainly to heritage material, and we need to move forward and to look at the multi-risk situation and to protect the complexity of our cultural heritage in terms of different perspectives. Well, in addition to that, it has been very much highlighted which are the climate parameters that need to be measured, as you can see here. So temperature, precipitation, but also wind speed, but also looking at the pollution, how much is important to have an understanding of which are the different pollutions parameters, no? And above all, we have here specific measures for the protection of heritage material. So looking at marble, limestone, wood, for example, metals, and all these strategies are taking into consideration the different damage process that could occur because of the changes in climate with projections for the future. But not only a focus on heritage materials, but also looking at which is the impact of extreme events on the landscape, for example, and on the built heritage in general. And here you can see some maps. These maps represent the research outputs that has been done and has been used for supporting by science, evidence, the strategies and the measures that are included in this National Strategy of Adaptation to Climate Change. So we are going to have, unfortunately, in the future, an increase of material dissolution because of the impact of acid rain, but also more the cohesion and exfoliation of marble in all the Mediterranean areas, but also in the north of Europe because of the changes in temperature and particularly the impact of solar radiation, but also changes in terms of biodegradation. So we need to look at the climate change impact as a challenge to be faced and also to find sustainable solutions, of course, for being able to safeguard and protect our cultural heritage. Well, in addition to the impacts, highlighting the impacts and the knowledge of the facts, there are available recommendations, of course, for which should be the main action to be undertaken in order to face the impact of climate change on cultural heritage. And the most important one that you can see here in the blue box is the one that indicates that it is necessary to integrate the existing management plans or under definition with measures of preparedness, emergency, and recovery, but allow me to underline once more time preparedness for the protection and safeguarding of cultural heritage. And this can be achieved either by adding specific sections concerning adaptation to climate change or inserting appropriate measures in existing sections through a review of directives and management plans already adopted. Here you can see also a list of other recommendations that are called in general, general actions of short length term. So disseminate the existing knowledge. The training is of paramount importance, so I will also listening the previous discussion and the importance, of course, to have research, but also this research should be transferred and also disseminated. And it is of paramount importance, of course, to assess which are the priority in relation to the state of conservation of the artifacts in response to climate and pollution changes. So knowledge and transfer of this knowledge. So I'm concluding this contribution by highlighting the fact that we have also in the National Plan for Adaptation to Climate Change in Italy specific indications and actions for the protection of cultural heritage. The procedure for the preparation of the national plan started at the beginning of the 2017. Unfortunately, it has not yet been adopted, but hopefully it will. I really hope that it will happen very soon. And here we have a declaration in Italy of macro region with diverse vulnerability, as you can see here, the example in the Po Plan, in the central of Italy, and impacts in the first column of the table with the potential risk and actions to be undertaken for the protection. Some literature references, and thank you very much for your attention, and going ahead with the other presentation.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Next, Mr. Dario Campo. Dario, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will speak about Venice and the problem of sea level rise and the consequences on the built heritage. And the problems are there is a series of problems that are connected each other. The first is the sea level rise. The second is sea surges that are driven by meteorological factors. The third factor is that the sea level rise is known since not so much time, so that it is important to go back in the time, because the sea level rise is the combination of the present day forcing of radiation, but also of glacier melting, and this is a very long-term phenomenon. And the last aspect is the impact on the life and on the monuments. The sea level in Venice is due to two factors. So one is the general sea level rise at the global level, and the second is the local land is sinking at an average rate of 1.1 millimeter per year. So we have in practice the combination of the two, and in Venice the sum of sea level rise at the global level plus the local land subsidence is 3.6 millimeter per year. We will see that now the curve is rising exponentially, so that for the next century the amount will be bigger. In Venice, the situation is no more sustainable, because as you see in this building, the door was on the canal, but now the water entered inside the floor, and it has been necessary to build an external dockway in wood. Now you see that bridges are too low for the passage of boats. Can you please start? There is a 30-second. Per favore. Grazie. You see how it's possible to pass under a bridge, and the boat starts, but at the bottom cannot pass through, so that it's necessary to push down the gondola to pass under the bridge. You see? And for 1 or 2 decades, this will be again possible. After it will be impossible. And in the case of fire, the boats of fire brigades cannot pass through the canals in Venice. So this is the result of the tide gauge that is known since 1.5 centuries, more or less, and the IPCC projection. But on the scale of the life of Venice, this is not enough, so that it is necessary to know the problem on a longer time scale. And as you see, when the sea level is higher, also the amount of water needed to flood the city is less and less and less. So you see the situation here in this door. It has been necessary to raise this door more than 1 meter to stay with the sea level, and on the right, the acqua alta in Venice. The acqua alta is due to the combination of 3 factors: meteorological surge, astronomical tide, and the oscillation of the Bergey. And if they are on the same phase, the high may be exceptionally high. And the result may be impressive. I mean that it may reach 2 meters, but also 3 meters in the most negative situation. And you see some situation in the high tide in 1966, 3 years ago. But in the past, you see also that the gondolas were on the San Marco Square. So it's not a novelty. But in the future, this may be higher and higher and higher, and more frequent and more frequent and more frequent. So in order to have an idea of this, there are in Venice 2 big canals for the entrance of cruise ship and oil tankers. And after this canal has been excavated, you see that the frequency of the flooding time in Venice has increased by 10 times. 10 times. So, so we can know and reconstruct the sea level in Venice after the Canaletto paintings, because they report the green level of the algae, and we can measure today how this level has moved for the sea level rise. And I go faster, and you see some doors, how they were in the Canaletto time, in the 18th century, and today. Some other examples. And also, you see how the sea level changed in the past centuries. But to go back in time, we have another possibility. The stairs that were built to reach the boats, and now are impossible to use because the sea has risen, and now the boats are too far from the landing. So the use of the stair now it is impossible. You see some simulation of what happened, and during some repair of the canals, the canal have been emptied, and we can see the situation. The green level is the level of the water today, and you see that the stairs that were built in the past have been an obstacle for boats that have crashed against the steps submerged. Or another case, you see how it was the sea level in the past and how it is today. Or another example, the stairs were built at the level of the boats, but now the sea level is much higher at impressive level. So it has been possible to go with the frogman team of the Italian police to measure the depth of the lowest step of stairs. And you see some examples of this, and we made this survey to all the buildings, 84 buildings in the Grand Canal, and you see that the sea level is rising over the last 7 centuries at the exponential rate. This means that also the acceleration has an exponential rate. And the impact on monuments, what is? The buildings, the Venetian building, were built on the basement that was waterproof in white Istria stone. Now it is below the threshold reached by water. At this point, the walls are impregnated of salts, and at this point, there is starting a destruction mechanism due to the crystallization of sodium chloride. And you see that all the buildings now are started a deterioration mechanism that is much quicker than before. And you see that a barrier on the door is not even more sufficient. And you see the effects of a fluorescence of salts on the bricks of the Venetian buildings. And you see the interior of a church where the altar has been destroyed and continues to be destroyed by the action of the salt. And you see in San Marco Square, the water penetrated inside, and the salt going out as a fluorescence between the tesserae of the mosaic. This tesserae will follow, of course, because of the salt will detach the tesserae. And in the Canova monuments, in Frasi Basilica, you see that these monuments are not in contact with water, but the capillary suction has transported the salt to the skin of these monuments that were treated with wax, and the wax is waterproof. So this has started another mechanism of destruction. And you see this, the last slide, the interior, the wooden furniture that have 2 or 3 centuries are immersed in water, and how was the level of water inside this building. So this is to give you a general, very quick, short, but a general overview of what may be the sea level rise and the impact on cultural heritage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dario, thank you very much indeed. Napoleon once described St. Mark's Square as the finest drawing room in Europe. Dario, yet following your excellent advice, we must do all we can in our own lifetimes to prevent St. Mark's Square becoming one of the largest swimming pools in Europe. Now I invite contributions to the floor. Who would like to speak? If you could raise your hands or your identity cards. Does anybody wish to contribute? That may not be the case. And as a result, I give the floor to Alberto Robolo to conclude this item. Alberto, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you also to the two experts for these two interesting presentations. Penso che
I think that this subject is very interesting for all of our countries and the cultural heritage of countries of the Council of Europe in particular, and as far as I'm concerned, Italy is considerable, and we need to try to protect it in any way possible. It was even more interesting to me because I'm part of this committee, and I do something completely different in daily life. I'm an accountant, and I think normally that when we see a report like this, it can help us to not just deal with things in our countries, but even locally, to let people understand how important it is to protect our cultural heritage. I'm also a town councillor in my city, Bergamo, which is a cultural heritage site for UNESCO concerning its walls, and in this case as well, we have difficulties with conservation of that stupendous heritage in my city. And I think that contributions like this can help us to give others a hand in the maintenance of our cultural heritage. And the next meeting in December, we'll also have the pleasure of hearing another expert who is also a friend, also comes from Bergamo, but has been working for many years in Versailles, and will be telling us about conservation of heritage in that context. So let me thank once again Dr. Bonata and Dr. Comufo for their presentations, which will certainly contribute to our report, and we'll be happy to go on contacting as we continue our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alberto. And in concluding this item, item 9, I would like very much also to thank all our experts and the contributions from all those who have taken an interest. We now come to item 10 on the agenda, which is competition of the subcommittees, and I seek approval of some proposed changes in the composition of the subcommittees. Ms. Hanaya Kravchuk would like to join the subcommittee on culture, diversity and heritage. Can the committee agree, please? I see no objections, so that is approved. I now come to item 11, committee work programme. There are rapporteurs and committee representatives who still need to make their declaration of no conflict of interest. I will now call those who are here, who I think are here, to put that right. And I begin, yes, I know, I begin with Alberto Ribolla. Can you please make your contribution of no about that?
Yes, again, I declare that I have no conflict of interest on my report.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Shanak is not here, and Yulia of Chinkova is also not here. So their affirmations can be postponed to when we next meet. I now invite Roberto Rampi to report on the Council of Europe Conference of Ministers of Culture in Strasbourg and the annual conference of the European Museum of the Year Award scheme in Tartu, Estonia, on the 7th of May.
Roberto, you have 3 minutes.
Sì, grazie Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be extremely quick here because also concerning the European Museums Conference, I think some things have already been mentioned. Yesterday, it was a really interesting conference with these national museums, and we saw what's been done by the Estonian government outside of the cultural capital of Estonia, which is Tartu, which is a university city, a city with great cultural investments. And for 3 days, these representatives of more than 60 museums that had been nominated were working on new museum guides, and we knew that we'd given a prize to Nanoplace, this excellent Irish museum, which is much more than a museum. It's a space that tells the story of Nano Nagal and the things that happened there. And this, I think, is something we've seen in other museums that have won other prizes than our own. These lovely experiences that groups have with museums that deal with colonization, for instance, that today are working on integration and immigrants. And there have been reports we've heard, for instance, on climate change, and many museums are committed to explaining what's happening and what possible solutions there may be. Many museums are also committed to scientific subjects. And I believe, I've said this before, taking part in the ceremony just before the President of the Republic of Estonia, who had been the director of the National Museum. So this is something that happens in Estonia, and I think that's actually fairly interesting to see that the director of the main museum went into politics and became president. And I told how our committee is very committed to the idea of democratic functioning of museums and people who work in museums. And I was really trying to transmit this great passion, this great conviction that men and women, who are more often women, because women much more often than men work in museums, and I think that's something interesting to see as well, without needing to set up quotas or things like that. In that area, there is already a very strong presence of women, people who have great passion for what they do, and I think who really share our values and are a great instrument. For the Conference of Ministers, we also mentioned this at the outset with Minister Franceschini, and I think the most important aspect there has been reactivated, because I think the fact that our ministers of culture are working together, either on a really fundamental event such as this, to call for investments in culture as a basic element for democracy, rule of law, and human rights, that this happens in countries with relevant frameworks. I think if it doesn't happen that way, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen through legal formalistic measures. And I think this is of great interest. I think our conference also was very strongly marked by international events. What's happening in Ukraine with Russia also weighed very heavily on our event. And I think a new commitment on the production, inter alia cultural production, cinema, multimedia, that can also contribute to creating a certain type of common perception. And I think that here one of the subjects we deal with should always be that of building Europe in this way, a Europe of the Council of Europe, not simply an economic relationship, but a perception of all being part of a common profile. Yesterday, we closed our day with a visit of the Etruscan Museum, and I think we've all seen how the Etruscan Museum, that there was already a Council of Europe 2,500 years ago, because these profiles that we had that characterize our countries already existed then, and our sense of belonging to something. And I think during this conference, I also had that feeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roberto. During the April part session, on behalf of our committee, Inka Hopsu went to the launching event of the network of contact parliamentarians for a healthy environment. Inka, would you perhaps be able to share with us some of your thoughts having been there on the events, and you have 3 minutes.
Unfortunately, she's not here.
Yes, that's fine. I think that Inka Hopso is probably not with us, so we will postpone that item to when we next meet, which leads me to item 12 on the agenda, communication from the chairperson of the committee. I'd like to tell members that the deadline for submission of nominations for the 2022 Václav Havel Prize has been extended until the 30th of June this year. And item 14 is other business. Does anybody wish to intervene with other business? Yes, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. According to the World Press Freedom Index for 2022, issued by the organization Reporters Without Borders, Greece fell from rank in 2021, which was 70, to 108, which is the worst ranking for an EU member. Another proof of current right-wing Greek government attitude and policies to media freedom and freedom of expression. I have a duty to pinpoint that investigative journalist George Karaivazi's execution perpetrators have not yet been brought to justice, and we are nowhere near because they are not found. And Gianna Papadakou and Kostas Vaxevanis, who are also investigative journalists and have made deep research in the Novartis scandal, are brought and faced with justice. The Council of Europe and especially our committee has to see into the matter. Media is the fourth power and is a pillar of democracy. In these times when we face serious global and national challenges, governments should protect the media and the freedom of expression, and they should strengthen the legal framework of freedom of expression. Media are a component of democracy, and journalists have to be protected all over the world, and of course within the sphere of the Council of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to intervene under the heading of other business? If not, we come to item 15, which is information and confirmation of our future meetings of this committee this year. We will next meet during the third part session between the 20th and 24th of June. After that, the fourth part session, the 10th to 14th of October. And thirdly, 5th, 6th of December of this year. So we, before concluding this meeting, I will just say one or two things. Firstly, to thank all of you very much for your attendance and for all your contributions, which have been most valuable. Next, I know that all of you will want to join with me in wishing to thank enormously our interpreters, secretariats, experts, and not least our wonderful hosts who have provided the opportunity for us to be inspired, to come here, to get together, as we have done in Rome, to network at the social events, which is a unique opportunity to get to know each other, and as George Fuchs and I from Scotland know, to plot and to think ahead in order to try to make things happen. I think we were very fortunate too to be joined by the Secretary General and the PACE President, both of whom have, in the view of, I think, all of us, behaved in an exemplary way, starting with the tenure of office of our PACE President, who has set the standard of decisive action on behalf of the Council of Europe, not to dinner, but to say we disapprove of what Russia has done in Ukraine. We will make our disapproval united. There's no division between the Council of Europe straight away, and that is what he has done, what the Secretary General has supported. And I think for all of us, all of our membership, all our colleagues and members fully support. It is a very great pleasure for George Fuchs and I, coming from the part of the United Kingdom, which is the north in Scotland, to extend a warm invitation to all of you this time next year to come there. We would put together an agenda which I think all of us would feel able to support. It would start with one of the initiatives that George Fuchs in Scotland has followed up very effectively, which is to help the elderly. We have around the city of Dundee some useful initiatives which are helping refugees and people get jobs, but in terms of education and culture. And that is what I think everybody would be very grateful to associate with the efforts and the philosophy of the Council of Europe. And so we extend that warm invitation, and in wishing you all very well, and I hope you have an enjoyable afternoon. I hope people, many of us, will be able to linger without having to rush back, but although with our busy schedules, we probably have to return sometime by the end of today or first thing tomorrow morning. I hope that all goes well for you, and I now conclude the meeting.